Well, I'm here with Dan, Cybermat Strikes, our regular detoxer from Down Under. And really, I mean, what's on my thumbnail is what you was kind of just texted me just a few days ago, Dan. You might as well enlighten us what's been going on. I'm off the show hates us, and that was you typing that, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah. No, I last week I had a visceral reaction to the show, and which culminated in me canceling my Disney subscription, and my, how it fights back and says, "I'm, you sure you really want to go? You really, really want to do this?" And I was like, "For the love of Doctor Who, I'm canceling." That's what I wrote in my comment.
Whoa. Do you know what? I had Jeremy on a year ago saying he's walking away from current Doctor Who, and he had his reasons. And it spoke to a lot of people out there
Mm.
who are going through these same emotions. I had John Daly cancelling his Doctor Who monthly recently, and he'd done but everyone. This is hard play for you. You're a Doctor Who fan. Look at the shelves behind you.
Mm. Yeah, and I know, and I've been, usually I'm approaching each week pretty optimistically, looking for the best in whatever sort of is presented to us. But yeah, last weekend it was I had a very similar reaction to the Timeless Child. It was just it was instinctive. I was quite upset, quite angry.
So let's have a look at this then. Let's unpack it a bit. So you had a very close moment to walking away from Doctor Who after Timeless Children. What
Mm.
brought you back?
Well, look, it took at that point in time, I felt that that we trod on aspects of the show that we were never meant to tread. So, in terms of actually telling us, giving the Doctor an origin that we just shouldn't have seen, and I felt like the show was broken to me at that point in time, and yeah, and it was in a most unsatisfying way too. So,
Yeah.
and yeah, I think it took me about 6 months to actually calm down, and I nearly threw all sold all this off and offloaded it at the time.
Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna do the most amazing change to canon, it needs to be a well-written story, and the exposition, the cartoons on the screen, and it was rushed and also, I mean, I know that one of your favorite eras is the Sylvester McCoy era, and I'm
Mm,
assuming it's later on when it got darker and more mysterious. So the last
mm.
thing you want is origin stories.
Yeah, yeah, and done in such a cheap 10-minute PowerPoint presentation, with and they never paid it off either. Even to this day, it never got paid off properly. Um, but yeah, and I mean, this week was I mean, fancy bringing the fugitive Doctor back in such a lame fashion as well. It was so tokenistic.
Yeah. So what was it then? Timeless Children really was, as for a lot of Doctor Who fans, it was a challenging moment. So
Mm.
what got you back into thinking, oh no, I'm gonna give it another go?
Look, I think it was just over the off season when the show wasn't on. Um, Coming back to classic and you know getting back into past eras, even New Who, earlier New Who. Um, I realized no, I like this, and and I've kind of always had this. I've never up until that point. That's the first time I've ever gone. That's it. I'm out. I've always kind of taken it rough with the smooth. You have your
Yeah,
favorite episodes, you have bad episodes, and you kind of always have this view that next week you'll just move on, and and the Doctor can always reset. Even now, I've kind of have this view that no matter how bad it is, new leadership, new stories can reset the whole thing. So, you know, it's to me it's a show that can always reinvent itself. It's never quite done. And there's nothing that can't be undone really in my mind. Uh,
yeah,
and that's one of the beauties is that you can take or leave a section of the show and not have, I guess, the rest of the world poisoned completely.
I think what seems to have changed, and that's what I'm going to ask you about now, is last week in particular. You're now saying that it's not that the origin story's blown everything apart, and I'm really angry about that. What you're saying now is, I feel hated.
Yeah, I think this week particular, look, there are aspects to the story I actually didn't mind, even though I don't think it's a particularly well-rounded story. There are aspects to it I actually appreciated and would have appreciated, but there was particular points to this episode that really it upset me, and I found it offensive, to be honest. And yeah, I think it was this, might have been this particular scene where, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was actually here. This was the bit where I just could not believe that this was the Doctor talking. He's a Time Lord, but then to be talking about being in a black body, when he's an alien from another planet that's thousands and thousands of years old, and I mean, he doesn't even have the lived experience necessarily of a black person or a Nigerian person either, which just that baffled me even more. From our perspective, he's regenerated on screen, but then to be talking about the fact that he and Belinda about the fact that they feel comfortable, around people from their own culture or overseas with other black people. I just thought I can't believe that someone put this to screen.
Yeah.
I just found it offensive. And also, it's hypocritical from what they're supposedly preaching as well. But it just felt regressive, and it felt like the show had gone somewhere, where it just shouldn't be. And this isn't what Doctor Who should be about either.
I think you make a very good point, Dan, that actually, if you're going to say something about the black experience, there's nothing wrong with that. The point is, this is a Doctor who's almost cosplaying, because he's so much bigger. He's not the sum of it, what he wears. He's not the sum of just his skin color. He's a universal traveler.
Yeah, well, and he's also someone that's been used to, being the person out of time, being the odd man out, wearing odd clothes, being an anachronism, I guess, to wherever he lands, and sort of relishing the fact that it's what's on the inside that counts, not what's on the outside. I mean, I don't think the Sixth Doctor could, is case in point, isn't he? The fact that you're going to run around looking like the Sixth Doctor.
This was my big problem myself. It really challenged me, and I really went for it last weekend, because it takes you out of the story, and I want to be off somewhere, and instead I'm very clear. And then you watch Unleashed as well, and you see all the interviews, and you're very clear that Ncuti wanted a Nigerian story, even though in Sex Education his character was maltreated in Nigeria, so he knows the truth. But they want to tell us an idealized version of another country. In the meantime, they're happy to slag our own culture off and say when we're on. And then you had Belinda Chandra saying about the same about being an Indian in Britain, and I sat there as a British license fee payer going, wow, the program we pay for is now slagging off the people who pay for it.
Well, and that was also because to me, this is, obviously down here in Australia, this to me is my culture, as much as yours. It's a shared heritage, I guess, and it's something that I've grown up with. And yeah, that that was my reaction, was like, whoa, hang on, like you really, yeah, you're really sticking it. And this whole scene doesn't push the story forward. It is about sticking it to us. It's there purely for that. Because if this was a Hinchcliffe story, we'd be starting, the Doctor would be landing in that back alleyway in Nigeria, and that would be where the story kicks off, where he notices people are missing. And that would be where the actual story, and that is where the actual, and that's the better part of the story too. Um, and that's the thing. There is actually a good story here, uh, when you don't have this crap being slammed into you.
It's just, I think the juxtaposition of this scene and this dialogue,
Yeah.
which then was followed by a very expensive scene where they staged a whole marketplace, 80 supporting artists, all obviously of a certain persuasion, unlike the colorblind casting when you have to show Britain in the past. And
Yeah.
so there's so many gears being pulled here. And the Black Doctor was so ecstatic to be in
Yeah.
Lagos. When he landed in London only a couple of weeks ago, and he was sniffing his nose in the air like the place stunk, and it was below him. And you think, add the two together, and I'm really starting to find a stench in this program, I have to say, and it's sticking it to me, and it's therefore provoking me to go near an exit door. So I
Yeah.
understand where you can get very angry with a program that you're supposed to love. But fundamentally, Dan, my problem is the moment RTD wants to keep breaking the fourth wall, and then on top of that, this breaks the fourth wall even more.
Well, and that's true too, because then the other obvious thing that in other people I know have mentioned, and I think you've mentioned it yourself, is that you've made a big thing about him being a gay doctor, and then you want to, put this being comfortable here on a pedestal, and it's not, you cannot, I mean, I'm not gay, but I cannot imagine that if I was, that I'd feel safe in that environment.
No, I mean, I've said I'm a football fan, and unfortunately, I've been deprived of going to World Cup finals because they're now in Middle East countries that are pretty, vile towards LGBT. Now, here we have, yes, if you're going to tell the story about Britain, they keep saying, oh, Britain, your past is ridiculous. Right, okay, warts and all, I understand. But if you want the truth about Britain, you also have to tell the truth about Nigeria. You can't suddenly do a Disney, idealized version where everybody gets on. No, they don't. Stoned to death, 14 years in jail just for loving somebody. Excuse me, call that out. RTD, call that out. You said these are dark times. So yes, I'm getting shouted at. And then personally, I'm going, that is an absolute load of twaddle there. Now, I'll be
through the voice of a privileged individual that has benefited from the very culture that he's slagging off too. That's the other thing, I don't think you'd find us in the, being afforded the same opportunity to take up their cultural icons.
No,
and that's the next bit that cheesed me right off, was that if you take their point and say, okay, this is going against what you've been saying all this time in calling us bigots for not wanting our cultural icon to be reformed into into other cultures and other races and things like that, which I was up for Shooty's Doctor, to be honest. It's all this sort of stuff that's turned me off. It's not actually him or the concept. It's just the fact that the whole thing's been hijacked to make points and stick it up us. And the thing is, if you take their point and you say, okay, so in this way, you're saying it's okay to actually want to hang out with your own culture and
Mm.
feel you need that point where you want to go and hang out with your. I suppose it's like saying I want to go hang out with my family or my
Mm.
own
Mm.
culture.
Yeah.
Well, that's going against what you've been telling us all along about saying, well, we should just bend over, bow down and allow our cultural icons to be appropriated. And then that's where it really soccer
Yeah.
punched me, is that this guy's been preaching, RTD's been preaching on his bloody Unleashed every week and ramming it down our throat for the last 2 seasons. The appropriation's
Mm.
not not acceptable. And yet it's clearly obvious that it's okay to appropriate as long as you're not white.
Yeah. I mean,
And
you
it's
look at
as
the
long as it's not our culture you're appropriating.
you look at Shooty, who's a Western man, of course he is, brought up in Britain, where I'm sure he was as westernized as everybody else and has done very well here. And then they double down on the the costume for this particular episode. Now, it's a bit like, I suppose, to a degree, Tom Baker being Sherlock Holmes for an episode in Talons. However, when you add the story and the message on top, and you add that the producer's telling us his politics, and so is the actor. Tom Baker wasn't, Philip Hinchcliffe wasn't. So basically, there's no other layers. You just go, oh, basically, he's doing a bit of a kind of Sherlock Holmes-esque outfit this week. Whereas this is, Philip Hinchcliffe never waffled on about cultural appropriation. So
No.
why would I have an argument with Philip Hinchcliffe? It's this
Well,
era.
yeah. And that's the thing. If and this is why he ruined the Sutek story last year, because making a point of, oh, we're gonna get rid of the mummies, we're gonna get rid of all the Egyptology, we're gonna just we're stripping Sutek back so that he's all the iconography that was built up around the character was basically stripped away because we can't possibly appropriate another culture. And then you've got this exact example here where you've appropriated our cultural icon, and you're putting other voices and other cultures over and above ours.
Well, look at the spider this week was. I mean, and somebody wrote to me and they said, they talk about cultural appropriation, but it wasn't a Nigerian god. It was, you can't say it was an African god. I think it was a Ghanaian god, Anansi.
Mhm.
And they'd kind of thought, well, it's the continent of Africa, so we'll take it from there and we'll put it there. And he had the kind of the iconography, the African death masks and all the rest. I mean,
Mm.
hello. I mean, Sutek, you've just trying to, as you've just said, to cleanse of all of the
Yeah.
Egyptian stuff, and now you've just done it with the African one. I mean, honestly, they can't see what they're doing, and that's the disappointment, because really we want to be taken out of the present day. And actually, RTD in an interview had said Doctor Who should be a safe space from the news, and I'm thinking, you're not taking me any much further from the news at all. It's like an extension. The Lucky Day, of course, we had the famous scene at the end when he took on Conrad Clark. You see, that
Yeah.
was, to me, that was also up there, because I just thought, you have reduced people whose opinion you don't like to noise. You've actually dehumanized them, which I find a very sinister move from somebody who says he's a Democrat.
Yeah. I mean, look, I was actually really into that episode right up until the old switcheroo
Yeah.
on Conrad there, and for a moment there I was excited with the switch because I thought, oh, we're think tank, oh, we're about to get, don't tell me he's gonna, think tank's back with K1 again and they're gonna take over Unit Tower with the K1 robot.
Yeah.
Something, my brain immediately went, oh, this could be really good. And then it's no, we're just going, we're gonna play Scooby-Doo monsters.
Yeah, and I just thought, oh, look, I've said it, and I make it clear every time. As a Doctor Who fan, this was a Doctor-defining moment. He was acting.
Yeah.
He was angry. It was a great TARDIS scene. I loved the lighting. I loved the acting from both of them. The only snag was I didn't like the dialogue.
Do you know that whole thing with, I mean, it was obvious that the Conrad scene in the TARDIS with the Doctor was a bolt on,
Mm,
because it was clearly, it was like Dot and Bubble. There was that
yeah.
at the end, the bit where it's just like it just, when you sit there and look at it in the cold hard light of day, it just it's clearly bolted in. It doesn't quite fit properly. It feels like there was more episodes because, man, like, there was definitely some sort of tension there going on, wasn't there? I
Mm.
mean, that wasn't just me, um, putting that in. I felt like there's a scene. I think there was a middle scene somewhere along the timeline of that episode where the Doctor and him had interactions earlier on, because yeah, I just felt there was stuff edited out of that
I just
their relationship.
right. I mean, since we are diehard Doctor Who fans, we can all quote. So I'll quote the Pyramids of Mars. We all know the bit when Tom Baker's Fourth Doctor gets irritated that there's
Mm,
a human in that lodge who's wittering on about his brother when the whole of the universe is at stake. And
yes.
he had perspective. He didn't really do it diplomatically because he was busy. Sarah had to try and
Mm,
kind of do the niceties bit. And we got that. It was consistent, and I understood the moment because the Doctor's going, look, we can't keep prattling around about the sensitivities of this person. He's not even your brother anymore.
yeah.
Stop it. The world and the universe is at risk now. Come on, man. I can get that logic.
Yeah.
But when he lost it in the TARDIS and was saying, your thoughts, your noise, I'm thinking, but where have we seen this before? Why has this suddenly happened? Why is the Doctor so bothered about people on the internet in 2025 when he travels the universe?
Well, so I noticed, because I still think different people, I think, got the wrong end of the stick on what Conrad was actually up to. I think a lot of people, I thought Conrad, people, I think a lot of us thought that Conrad didn't actually believe a lot of it was true. And everyone's going, but how could you not believe it was true, like, with everything you've seen?
Yeah.
But I think, no, he the point was that he actually did know it was all true, and that he was using lies to basically discredit it. So it was like a kind of a double bluff.
Yeah.
And I mean, it needed a lot of mental gymnastics to sort of get your head around that. And I don't know that it kind of works, because it was pretty evident. It took me a while to sort of think it through, to go, okay, so the point is that he actually knows that they're true, but he's presenting it, he's
Mm.
using fake news to basically make out that this is all fake, to discredit it.
Yeah.
But it's like, but what's your goal? Is it to take it down, or is it just to, like, it was pretty evident when you think about it that it did not, the resolution wasn't going to ever going to make any sense with him, because what's his ultimate goal?
We
It's
see
just
this
to discredit it.
and this is what I mean. We're talking obviously about this situation here, which is Dan. I'm off, the show hates us. This has been a problem for a couple of weeks for Dan, but I'm agreeing with a lot of what he's saying. I found I was perplexed. I thought, why is the Doctor so angry about?
Mm,
You've called it kind of, it's like fake news. It's like people spreading fake stories.
mm,
Is that the crime of the universe, that somebody does that? If
yeah,
you really want to put it in a nutshell, which is words and information, but he's not a mass murderer, and he's not committing genocide, and he's not torturing people on this planet. Why is I am struggling with this, that the Doctor is so angry about words going on an internet, even if they're incorrect or untruthful, and yet
yeah,
people dying and starving seems to be getting him less angry, because surely in this week's episode he was having a laugh that he was drinking with a god and he caused a drought and people must have died. Yeah, I thought the inconsistency here is beyond belief.
Yeah, this week the tone of the Doctor was very much I mean, it reeked of a self-insert writer, putting their own sort of themselves in as the Doctor rather than the Doctor actually being the Doctor. Um, it and you get a lot of, oh, that's not the Doctor, but at the same time, it's like, no, well, actually, it's pretty evident that that it's the voice of the actor is putting himself in the position of the Doctor, because it's the views of the writer, not the actual Doctor,
Yeah.
because
Well,
it clearly doesn't fit.
this bit, please tell me, and a few people keep quoting a Capaldi or a moment when a New Who doctor says something where he says, "You don't want to see me angry" or something. But when the doctor says, "You die in a prison cell, boiling in anger and poison until your heart packs in at 49, alone and unloved and forgotten," that level of sadism I've
Mm.
never I personally don't think I've ever seen in the Doctor. And again, it seems unwarranted when you're talking about somebody who basically spreads untruths.
Well, and I think this goes to the heart of why I feel like there was a big chunk of this love triangle chopped out of the episode, possibly to soften the tone. But it's clear, like, the thing that hit home to me was what Conrad did to Millie, to Ruby Sunday, because, like,
Yeah.
he clearly was faking it the whole time. Um, and yet it's like I was crushed for Ruby, because I was
Yeah.
like, no, you wouldn't do that to Ruby. Who would do that to Ruby? That's crazy. Like, no, no. Why would you be that horrible? Like, she didn't do anything to you. And, well, like, why would are you lying about the fact that she was insufferable in that moment? Because are you lying to make it like, to sort of throw her under the bus on camera? But I mean, you've kind of been intimate with her for what?
Yeah.
And this is where I think the subtext was that he's actually gay and has no interest in her whatsoever. And I think there was another scene with him and the Doctor that we weren't afforded. I think we had another rogue scene that I think got edited out somewhere along the way.
It is interesting, Dan, that I've got it. I mean, I've got them all on my computer. When this Jonah Hauerkin actor was first seen filming a year or so back, and I've still got photographs of what he's going to look like in the finale,
Yeah,
there was clearly a leak saying that
there's a love triangle.
there's a love triangle. Yeah. So whether the
Yeah,
love triangle still plays out, I don't know. But yes, it doesn't work in that episode. The other thing that doesn't work is Mr. Gay Doctor in Rogue went walkies in the bushes with the space villain and forgot about Millie. And in this episode, he was kicking off saying, "You don't betray my companion." Well, you did.
yeah. Yeah, and that's why I feel like there's a subtext of a relationship between him and the Doctor, where the Doctor's worked out that he's, used Millie to get close to him, and they've had some sort of fling, him and the Doctor, that he's then found out that he's done this to Millie. And I think that's the subtext of why he's so angry and hot under the collar, because there is some sort of sexual tension. To me, I
Yeah.
don't quite
Yeah.
fully get it, but there's something there we're missing that we didn't see. It's something that happened off screen, or it was edited out.
Yeah. So have we kind of got in a nutshell the reasons why you've hit the decision you've hit at the moment, or is there anything I've missed out here?
Yeah, look, I just think that it's evident to me that while there were aspects of a good story here this week, I'm not going to sit here and just have my cultural icon appropriated to and then used to insult me.
Yeah.
And this week was the first week where I just went, no, this actually isn't my Doctor. And I'm not going to, I've always sort of been worried about, bearing witness to what's
Yeah.
coming.
Yeah.
But this week I was like, nah, that's it. I'm canceling. I'm out.
Now, I
Um,
said to you just before we recorded, I said, would you be though? Because you know, I know what it's like to be a Doctor Who fan. We say these things or we think these things, but you know, it's on the
Mm.
TV the next week. Now I know you've cancelled your Disney subscription, so therefore it's practically impossible unless you then suddenly resubscribe. But my question was, would you be tempted to just see what happens? That was my question. That
Well, and that's kind of where, you know, because, you know, I've been um, baiting Dwayne each week to come on,
mm,
mate. Just watch this one. You'll like this one. Oh, this one's great, mate. Just watch it. And um, but yeah, no, this week did it for me. I'm quite happy to sit this one out. If something amazing happens, I'm not going to have what happened with Empire Death. I was fully sucked into that finale last year with Sutek, and you know, geez, that I was really upset with the final resolution of that. And I've, it's so close and yet so far. Like I was so disappointed that, you know, that Gabriel Wolf had been used to
yeah,
to bring it back, and I really appreciated the fact that the guy did it, and he did a good job of what he was given. But you know, to bring Sutek back in the way, in the less than satisfying way it was used, it's just, and all on the guise of, you know, oh well, we can't appropriate the culture. So,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, you know, I don't delight in hearing these messages, and I honestly, when I did see your text, I was gutted for you because it's an awful feeling that. But let's cheer ourselves up. Eras and
Yeah.
moments you've really enjoyed. One of your favorite stories, you said. So, in a way, we could talk about it for a moment and say, well, why, how far away are we from that, and do you think we can get this back? So basically, Android Invasion, everybody. You know, Dan was saying Android Invasion is one of his favorites, and what's in there that's missing now?
Well, funnily enough, there are elements in this, even this week, that is this stuff. You just need to get rid of the other stuff so that you don't get pulled out of the story, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Like, so I don't have a problem with the doctor landing in Nigeria, finding a mystery, and you know, unpacking it and finding it there's a god in a barber shop. I actually think that that's a really cool premise. Um, to be honest, they should have just had that that the TARDIS land in that alleyway, and have the Doctor wander off and the companions separated like he always used to do.
yeah.
There's nothing not Doctor Who about that. What was not Doctor Who was all that crap in the TARDIS space, that whole scene that didn't need to be there.
The lazy bits, yeah.
Yeah,
The
it's clearly, it's RTD's sermon of the week, and it's those bits that are actually littered through the episodes that actually ruin the episode.
Now the other thing about Android Invasion is it has defining moments, classic moments. Everybody refers to this moment, of course, as
Yeah.
an example. And what worries me about New Who, and it is now because I think it's a tired brand, is what used to work isn't now, which is if it's a 45-minute episode, it's putting a lot of it's putting a lot on to try and expect to make defining moments like this that will live in Doctor Who history every week because
Mm.
the one episodes you've got to get on with the story, you've got to introduce it, get some jeopardy and sort it out, whereas these were built up. And so in a 4-episode story, this is just one moment, but it's the moment we all remember.
Yeah. It's funny, I kind of have a view that if you, because we kind of know that, you know, the serialized format of Classic Who, it's designed to maximize the return on the investment in of the actual production of the story, isn't it? Like
Mm,
you get, usually it's 4 25 minutes. When I think when Doctor Who was at its best and sharpest was when the story kind of moved in that 4 episode window.
mm,
But by today's standards, I think you'd have to admit that probably trimming it down to 3
yeah,
22-minute episodes would be the ideal format, because it gives you that 3-part act, I guess.
yeah,
Um, and if you wrote those 22 minutes, you could land some cliffhangers, and they'd be bingeable as well. Ironically, with I think the 22-minute would suit the binge model better.
Yeah, well, they're saying now that I mean, I think I did it in one of my shows last week. Well, the whole idea of a 45-minute was because of the syndication. Well, that's not done
Yeah,
anymore. The episodic getting rid of was because, quite rightly, RTD was concerned that if you had a casual viewer and it was part 3 of a story and they've missed the first 2, that casual viewer will just turn over. That was true.
yeah,
That's true. But that's not the world. We've got BBC iPlayer. You've got your version of it. That doesn't happen, and we all binge watch as well. So that doesn't.
yeah,
No.
yeah. And I guess, see, the thing is, I don't know that you guys in the UK have ever got to have Doctor Who the way we grew up with it. Doctor Who for us through the 80s and 90s was very bingeable in the sense that you guys had to wait a week for an episode, whereas we would literally get on repeat through the whole year. 5 days a week, we would get a 22-minute episode every day, same time every day. And you knew that if you turn on the TV at 6 o'clock on a weeknight, you were on the ABC, you were getting a Doctor Who. You were going to get a half-hour episode of Doctor Who that night. And usually filled in with like Danger Mouse or something, a Cosgrove Hall production. Usually one of their cartoons was filling in the little gap in the half-hour window. And we got that for 2 decades, basically. And so we grew up binging Doctor Who in a sense. And I think one episode a day is actually a really good, like if you just have it on repeat, is actually really good. Because we'd start at Robot quite often. You'd start at Robot, you'd binge the whole Tom Baker era, and then he'd regenerate into Peter Davison, and then you'd be like, oh damn, the Doctor's gone. And then they'd restart with like the Sylvester McCoy era. And they'd jump around. So and it was appropriate at that point for me because the Sylvester McCoy era was the actual contemporary era. So whereas Tom Baker was obviously quite an old show at that point.
Well, what's funny is obviously Dan listed the Android invasion of. I mean, the crowds are interested, aren't they? Because we've had the Nancy, the God Spide. The gods thing isn't doing it for me. I have to say they're too powerful, but then easily solved. I like having a proper little beast like this. I mean, I always joke about the Android invasion, saying it was a similar vibe to Terror of the Zygons, but didn't quite land it. But obviously, you think differently. But the other one that I think we both would agree on is the Horror Fan Rock as one of your favorites.
Yeah, I think with Android Invasion, it's a very page turner type Terry Nation story, isn't it? Where I mean, let's face it, the resolution is a bit crap, but it's still so much fun. You don't care.
Yeah. Well, we can slightly disagree on Android Invasion. I think it was to me, it was one of the slightly weaker ones in a really strong season, and I think that it lost out there to me. But each to our own. That's how Doctor Who fans work. Do we agree on this is actually one of the all-time best horror fan rock?
Yeah, I mean, this is quintessential Doctor Who at this stage, isn't it? It's it's how to do horror on a very cheap budget, but boy, is it impactful. And I've got to say, I feel like this is probably the closest thing to a near perfect 4-part story. I don't think there's any part of the 4 parts where it really slows down. Is that do you have that view, Brendan?
Yes, and do you know what, an RTD? It was weird because when he was talking about, well, he waffles on too much, but he was talking about if we didn't have the Disney money, we'd go back to being less, low budget, and we'll still be able to make stuff like Horror Fan Rock. And he actually quotes it, and you're going, well, you should be doing that now. Just because you've got a bigger checkbook doesn't mean you shouldn't just make claustrophobic sets a very
Yeah.
minimal cast, and just build the world via good acting and good dialogue. And I'm sorry, but Doctor Who's not off the scale genius. It's called scare people. It's
Mm.
called put them in situations away from the present day and get us a bit kind of, whoa, this is a bit out there. Whoa, this is whoa. I mean, this one's amazing. As a kid, I love this one. Everybody
Yeah.
dies. Brilliant.
Yep. And the reality is it stands up today, and with the smallest of budgets to add in some effect, to sharpen up some of the effects that just time wouldn't allow back then, and technology, it just mwah, chef's kiss. It just really makes it that little bit more better. But it just proves that I still think today that you could make this type of show, on a much more consolidated budget than what they're burning up on the Disney Who.
Yeah, I mean, my example with the last week's episode was there was there was no real narrative reason to have 80 supporting artists filming a pretend Lagos market scene when the market scene
Mm.
really was just to show the Doctor saying hello to people. It was narratively not important, but obviously they wanted it because they wanted to say how amazingly loving every Nigerian is. Yeah, whatever. So
Look, and to be honest, this week's episode with, like, I thought the chap that played the barber was excellent. I
yeah,
actually think the
yes,
individual actors were the strongest part of the
yes,
episode, but they didn't do anything with them. It was like,
yeah.
oh my god, like he was so good, and that's what makes these stories live and die, by the fantastic actors they've got on screen each week.
Yeah. Do you get there's rumors of various people wanting to put their tuppence into Doctor Who if RTD goes or whatever, but do you get a vibe really that, I know this is set in kind of Edwardian era, but that end of Victorian Edwardian is a brilliant period to just plonk a Doctor Who story, I think.
It's a good place, and because it's a good period for horror, because there's not too much technology, but there's enough technology to have fun.
Yeah.
Um, like, I mean, how cool is it using the lighthouse,
Yeah.
to take down an alien spacecraft? It's awesome. Um, it is really cool how they turn the lighthouse into a weapon. I mean, it's
Because
completely ridiculous, but it is funny.
yeah, well, no, it is, and I think that's what we liked as fans. It was creative. The Marconi
Yeah.
score in Pyramids of Mars,
Yes.
just little things like that, and it's clever writing. It's relevant to the time, and there's
It's
a
kind of
darkness. There's a
it's
darkness.
there's a plausibility to the implausible, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Whereas at the moment, the era is not respecting the viewer in current Who, because the science just there's not even a ring of truth to it. I mean,
yeah,
like, like, it's cool that you've got something powered by a god or something powered by consuming stories in essence, but then you find out it's a robot spider in some other realm, and it's just like, what? Well,
yeah,
why?
I-
Where, I still don't know where they were going with that, but anyway.
yeah. Well, you also, to widen the scope, you also were saying that actually what you if you were showrunner, I suppose you'd be saying let's ape the initial TARDIS crew of the Fourth Doctor.
Yeah, this was it, I remember as a kid, even now, it's a comfort blanket, taking off with the Dr. Harry and Sarah.
Yeah, there was something about, and actually, to me, it has a realism to it because the Doctor's
Yes.
irritated with Harry.
Yeah.
The Sarah's kind of irritated with Harry, the chivalrous gentleman, but a little bit not. He's not modern, is he? And
Or Harry.
Yeah, and I kind of liked it. Within the three, there was a realism there, but I was in no doubt that while the Fourth Doctor was irritated by Harry, he would always have his back.
Yes, yeah, and Harry did hold his own quite often as well, you know. So in some cases, he was right, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was just, I think it must have been a gift for a proper TV writer to have this mix of actors and characters because, you know, that Harry's no fool, he's a doctor.
Yeah,
And I mean, to be
and
honest, they've done that a few times now, haven't they? You
I
know,
mean, he's kind of the Mickey Smith
yeah,
of New Who, because it's funny because you think whenever I think through the Fourth Doctor right through to sort of when Leela turns up, my head canon just my brain says Unit and Harry and all these guys were there through that whole era, and they're actually not. But the show does a really good job of getting that mileage out of them because they're kind of yo-yoing backward and forward from
yeah.
Earth to other stories. And as the viewer, you don't actually notice that Unit's disappeared. It's or the Doctor hasn't gone back to it in a while.
No. And there's something, I mean, there's something in the acting, there's something in the response. The companions
Yeah.
are the companions. The companions don't go too far up. Sometimes it's like in Revenge of the Cybermen, Harry and Sarah, when they're both shackled to the gold, you know, and they're
Yeah.
winding each other up slightly. They're like two brother and sister.
Yeah.
Um, but the Doctor's another level. It's so clear that, and they'll have little bits to go at the Doctor, but the Doctor's higher, and so
Yeah.
the hierarchy I could live with. Um, um, and I love to see sometimes when Sarah and Harry were kind of doing their little kind of sibling bickering, but they would still work as a team to help the main man.
Yeah. Yeah. No, they were definitely they were a good double act, and it was lovely to have a friendship that wasn't sexualized in any way, and you know, there's no sort of it's just a healthy relationship that's got no other agenda to it.
This is what's shocking, isn't it? That this is a purer era, really, of Doctor
Yeah.
Who. I mean, people waffle on about talons and oh and all that stuff. Listen, stop it. This was a much purer era. How can
Mm,
anybody get sniffy about, oh well, in talons that wouldn't happen now, and in that wouldn't happen now? Look what is happening now. You've got
yeah.
so much sexualization of every single thing, and then the worst of the worst. I can't stand people who do that revisionism and go back to this classic era and say, oh, don't you think that when Harry was holding Sarah in Revenge of the Cybermen that there was more to it? And you go, no,
No.
no. He was clearly a gentleman, and he's just he couldn't say right for saying wrong, could he? That was all.
Yeah, no. He was a very old-fashioned soul, wasn't he, Harry?
Yeah, and she was supposed to be the women's libber, so hello, yeah, there's your tension. It
Yeah.
wasn't sexual tension, it was political tension and a little bit of kind of away. I mean, I was in no doubt, and this is the gift of Liz Sladen and Ian Marter. I was in no doubt that they had affection for each other, as in they liked each other.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Within the bickering, it wasn't nasty bickering. It was
Yeah.
actually just like, oh, we, you know, and all this sort of a little bit of give and take. And of course, the magic of the early years of Tom Baker, when he was so imaginative and creative with the way he acts. I mean, I always remember that bit, actually, funny enough, in Revenge of the Cybermen, when he shouts at Harry for trying to save his life, but obviously he might have killed him in the process.
It is a very the Doctor's quite alien his reaction there, isn't it?
Yeah.
He's just like, what did Harry do? He didn't know you were carrying a bloody bomb.
and and
Yeah.
and you know, Sarah, that I've in some streams I have said that when Donna Noble's been written well, she's a brilliant companion too. But Sarah Jane Smith, wow, those early years, and I have to say, I don't know if it's because they're both from Liverpool. I don't know if it was just one of those amazing moments that you maybe get in life when yeah, you both get the job, you both, it's doing well, but there's something more going on there. They have a connection that I don't think you can dream up.
There is, yeah, there's definitely there's a chemistry between these two, but I mean, it's funny if you step back and watch Liz Sladen rather than the third Doctor and the fourth Doctor era. If you watch the Liz Sladen era, the Sarah Jane Smith era, from Time Warrior right through to Hand of Fear, um, I mean, she's on point from the minute she wanders aboard the TARDIS, isn't she? I mean,
Yeah.
she's a great companion right through that Pertwee season,
And she,
even through Peloton.
and what's interesting is, now and again, I catch a clip of Liz Sladen at a convention or something. She was
Mhm.
no mug. Like sometimes you find actors who, yeah, they know that, you have to kind of, you know, say all the right things because these are your audience, and it's all a front. But there was something about Liz Sladen, and I think it's her, and it's a Liverpudlian in her, where, hey, don't ask her a stupid question. She's no mug. I love it. I think there's
Mm.
that clip on YouTube where you see her going, what the hell are you talking about? And you can see the liver pudding come out straight away. And I think there's an extra spark there that I absolutely just thought made this chemistry. It was,
Mm. Yeah.
um, but you see, we might agree on this, but from my streams that I am slightly less inclined on this era. But this is one of your favorite eras too, isn't it? The McCoy years.
Yeah, look, I really did. It's funny because for me, I don't remember watching Colin Baker into Sylvester McCoy. I just remember McCoy's Time in the Rani. I remember the Time in the Rani episode, and then everything just kicked off from there when I was watching it on reruns and stuff. So quite often I'd cop all 3 seasons of Sylvester McCoy, after school, over the years. And yeah, it was an era that I fully enjoyed without, like, I wasn't aware of all the hiatus and all that stuff. I came along after all of that. So for me, this was just, for me, it was like the Tom Baker era. Like, I didn't even think that they were that far apart in time, which I suppose back then they weren't that far apart. But um, I kind of knew then that this is old Who and this is
Mm,
new Who. So
mm.
this Sylvester McCoy was my new Who. It had a new theme, and it felt contemporary at the time. So yeah, for me, it's what I grew up with, I guess, and even all the bombastic Kev McCulloch music and stuff like that. To me, that was just that's new Doctor Who.
As a, you see, we were a different age, and I have to appreciate this. That for example, I adore the Sea Devils. The music, yeah, it's not my winning thing, but you almost accept it's part of the Sea Devils. Are you the same in this era? Is it because it's your childhood when you hear the music that to me just jars? Are you kind of it has a nostalgia to it?
Yeah, it does have a nostalgia to it because in at that point in the 80s, there was a lot of keyboard bashing, I guess, in terms of music, and it's funny because it's the same, like all those experimental electronics tracks through the Pertwee era. To me, is what makes it adds a quality to the,
Yeah.
like when you hear the Masters themes and stuff in uh, uh, Terror of the Autons and things like that. I love all of that. It to me, it actually it becomes that era, if that makes
Yes,
sense.
well, it's very distinctive. I mean, it stands out.
Yeah,
Um, so
and I
come on
think
then.
that's why I think classic stands up so well. Is it is very, there's iconography in the look, the feel, the characterization, and the effects of each era that make it actually kind of stand out for its own
Yeah, even when you know that there's a Doctor Who story, I mean, we all know they said the Master was based on Moriarty, but even though that
Mm,
was the trigger, it's so distinctive within the Doctor
yeah,
Who story. And, the Philip Hinchcliffe era, we know which movies they were trying to ape, but it is so
yeah,
Doctor Who. Whereas I
yes,
think the present era is I think it's getting suffocated by trying to be something else, and we're
yeah.
not getting enough Doctor Who.
Correct. I agree with that. That it feels like we're so busy trying to be something that we're not, that we're missing what Doctor Who actually is.
Yeah.
Um, and I think RTD, the success of RTD1 back in 2005 was that he took what was good about, say, the McCoy era and moved it forward 16 years, and was able to hit a contemporary audience, and it had the money it needed. It had what it needed to capture a mainstream audience. um Now we've got the money that we should be able to do that, but I actually think we you look at what's happening today, the overcooking of CGI.
Yeah.
I don't think that's not what's going to make a show stand the test of time, and I think that's why classic's gonna actually fare better in the
Yeah.
long run.
I, I understand that television viewers expect certain things. I get that. And maybe we put up with bits and bobs that wouldn't be really allowed now. However, given that, I take your point, because we're about to hit, as you know, the Interstellar Song Contest, where it looks as though there's an awful lot of CGI going on. And I dare say it's a good job. I mean, I'm not here to knock the bloody thing,
Mm,
but I get the impression that, God, did you need to do that?
yeah,
When actually it is the spirit of Doctor Who was what really carried it. We loved the show because of the chemistry. We loved the show because of its quirkiness. We loved the show because of its cheek. We loved the show because of what it was trying to do, not that it actually every week managed to execute it. Um,
yeah. The ambition outstretched the resources.
yeah, and nowadays I get worried that the resources say, "Hey, look, we can show you it," and then suddenly you're going, but it doesn't feel Doctor Who. Um, I mean,
Mm,
the Interstellar Song Contest, I've seen enough clips and I'm thinking, well, it does look pretty, and it looks like a monster fest of lots of creatures everywhere. But I don't know if in essence it'll feel like Doctor Who, or it'll still feel like a cheaper American sci-fi show. And
mm.
Doctor Who always looked and smelt different.
Yeah, because I think it was trying to feel as adult as it could pull off. I mean, that's one of the things that, even in things like Attack of the Cybermen, where they gave you the crushing, the Cyberman crushing Lytton's hand and things like
Yeah,
that. I remember at the time thinking, that's awesome. Oh, this is what I've always
yeah,
wanted out of,
yeah,
you know, you should have that, fear of the Cybermen because they're going to crush your hands if if you don't conform, kind of thing.
yeah. I mean, for me, yeah, I agree with that moment. Caves of Androzani, I thought, this is so adult. I love this. It just felt like, whoa, Doctor Who's really taking itself seriously. And
Mm,
yes, the tension between Jack and Perry, which does borderline look problematic. You're going, oh gosh, Doctor Who really does feel like a grown-up show. That sort of thing. And of course, the drug run in it was so gritty. And that's what
mm,
you were dreaming of with Doctor Who. Having said that, we just showed Horror Fan Rock earlier, and Horror Fan Rock, as you said, and I think it is a standout because the dialogue, the acting, the
mm,
vibe. It, I would gladly show that to a non-Doctor Who,
yep,
non-sci-fi person now and say that's why I
yep.
like Doctor Who.
Yeah, exactly. No, you can't. Yeah, you can show that to someone, and it's of its time in a sense, but it's also stands the test of time at the same time because the actors, the dialogues. I mean, I mean, it's brutal. Everyone dies in that episode. They literally walk away from an empty lighthouse and then, like they say, Tom Baker says in the closing credits, in a over toppled chair. It's
Yeah.
just fantastic.
And how much CGI, Dan, do you really need for that cliffhanger when he says, "I thought I was locking the, I thought I was locking the monster out. I think I've locked him in."
Locked it
I
in. Yeah.
That is just beautiful. It's a lovely, beautiful construction of words. It's a clever little wordplay there. And it really, and of course, in my case, being in Britain, that I had a week dangling on that one, going, it's like behind you. It's a bit like those urban myths. Those urban myths you used to tell at school. The classic one about somebody got in the car behind you, and the car behind is flashing their headlights, and they're going, somebody's in the back seat, and you're going, wow.
Well, and there's so many things that with just some simple model shots and it's the director going, they get the story they're trying to tell, and they know what they need, the bare minimum they need to get in the can to tell the story effectively and create the tension and things like that. Even just things like, when Tom's dragging the shovel in the coal room.
Yeah.
And you're going, oh my God, there's a monster in there. And
yes.
and it's the claustrophobia of they've managed to convey the claustrophobia of the lighthouse in that, you can't get down the lighthouse without going past the damn thing. Yeah. And if you go up to the top of the lighthouse and you've thought, oh, I'll climb down the outside. It's like this thing's climbing up the walls on the outside it's fantastic.
So because there's a difference in our experience, I'm showing lots more shots of McCoy. So I know, I understand the horror fan rock element, but in McCoy, which is your up, it's your best McCoy one. What's the up?
Well, look, in terms of, I think a grown-up me, like, I've got a real appreciation for Ghostlight these days. Especially the director's cut that they did of it. I love Survival as well for various reasons, and I think Anthony Ainley's in fine form in his last episode there, my last story.
Yeah.
Remembrance of the Daleks, Curse of Fenric, even just giving Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart a decent run, after things like Mordred Undead, where I feel like he got ripped off.
Yeah.
But the I even like Delta and the Bannermen for all its faults. I just love the fact that they go, right, well, we're going to set this in some clapped out bloody holiday camp.
Yeah.
And we're going to tell a story, and we're going to turn a bus into a spaceship. Brilliant.
Yes, I have to say there was a moment in episode 1 when, of course, I'm older, so more cynical. It's different, isn't it? And I thought that's the Doctor Who I like.
And it's dark. They killed everyone on the bus. They blow everyone up.
Yeah,
I remember as a kid just going, "Oh my God, they killed everyone."
And I love Ken Dodd separately, but even though Ken Dodd being the kind of the toll booth and everything, and I thought, this is a galactic toll booth. We've got the Shara-banging space, that we've got the old holiday camp, and you've got a vibe of an era. This is what Doctor Who does, and I have other issues, but that's for a different day. But the point is, that is what Doctor Who should be doing.
Yeah, I mean, even in Time and the Rani, those bubble traps.
Oh yeah.
That is, like, even today, that's still impressive, because it's actually more impressive because it feels less CGI. Because you can feel that there's actual, it's clear that there's, it's not all just CGI. They've fair income, done some very clever real world effects there to pull that off.
Yeah, I have to say that was such a shame with Time and Rani because you had the studio bound sound that they
Yeah.
needed actually more incidental music because poor Sylvester McCoy was doing lots of slapstick and that's allowed. But
Mm.
you heard the set too much. It was a very clunky. And then you had that great outside broadcast when they set up camera wise and visual effects wise. These amazing. It was, and and I have to say, let's be honest, it's a genius idea by Pip and Jane Baker. These bubble traps. Who thinks of these things? That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Because they get a bad, a bad time, don't they? Pip and Jane Baker, but that's clever.
Hey, their stories always had a beginning, middle, and an end, and they made sense. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So if you were showrunner, you're a Doctor Who fan. If you were showrunner, which era of all of them would you want to kind of emulate now to bring back the full gist of Doctor Who?
Oh, look, I think there's some aspects of even New Who that I'd like to, roll up into that. It's to be honest, I think all of those eras have got something to offer. Um, the McCoy era, the Candyman. I love the Candyman. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, he was terrifying. I didn't know that he was something in over in the UK that you guys knew as something else. To me, he was just bloody terrifying. The idea of like candy bloody killing you was a really great concept.
Well, the Who pets don't like watching this episode because they're like Fifi.
Oh yeah, they get Fifi gets a raw deal, doesn't he?
Yeah,
Flush
it's a
down
bit
the
like
drain.
Fifi's a bit like puppet porn. I'm sorry, they're not allowed to watch it, especially
Oh
if it dies. I mean, even Time Lash. I like Time Lash. Is it the Bandrel snake?
yeah,
I kind of like that.
the
I kind of,
diploma.
yeah. On behalf, yeah,
We
yeah,
will honor the doctor for his sacrifice, even though we just blew up the planet.
yeah. I'm only a puppet. You're taking me seriously. Anyway, so oh well, Dan. I was sorry to see your text, and I know you're ever optimistic. And if God, as we are with Doctor Who fans, if only they turn the corner. I know you'll be back if we turn the corner and they start doing it properly again.
Yeah, well, I think at the moment I'm really I feel like Christopher Eccleston's comments are ringing in my head, and that is, this show could turn on a dime tomorrow. If you sack Russell T Davies,
Yeah,
Julie Gardner, and Jane Tranter.
yeah. I know what you mean.
That's what it needs. You can't sit down and look at the current era and go, the show needed a course correction after the Chibnall era, and everyone thought we were about to get that. And yeah, what's happened isn't it? Is it? I mean, there's numbers tell you that.
No, I think the worst thing that happened to RTD is the Disney deal, which meant he felt as though he had to do um, two seasons back to back, and I think that's been the killer because number one, that means he hasn't got the time really to plan the stories properly. No, I know he's done it, but the point is, in the best situation, this would have been done carefully. And instead, I feel as though there's been a bit of a rush. And God's a steady easy. We'll have a God a week. And then, no, 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 stop it, stop it, stop it. Good stories is what we want, not a quick fix to just cover the whole series with. So we'll be doing Detox again, I hope, Dan, and I know we'll be doing stuff again. But in the meantime, thanks for being so kind of honest about where you stand today about Doctor Who. And you never know, we might see something in the future that is classic Doctor Who.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, I was even if it got back to some New Who, because I've got the first 4 seasons there of New Who, and my nieces and nephews love Matt Smith. and it's it it is in that dark place again. It feels like it's actually feels worse now. Being a Doctor Who fan, than through the wilderness years, because people used to be like, "Oh, you're really a fan of Doctor Who," and then when 2005 hit, everyone was like, "Oh, are you watching Doctor Who?" And it was kind of cool. Now, if if you talk, if anyone asks about it, it's kind of like, no, yeah, I kind of watch it, yeah, maybe.
Yes, yes, I know
But
that.
then it's
Oh,
back to sort of an awkward sort of, are you still watching that crap?
yes, yes, I agree with that one. That's definitely the vibe. Well, thank you for your time, Dan, and we'll talk again. So thank you, everybody, and
Cheers,
please
gang.
do subscribe and pass the word. We do discuss, hopefully, Doctor Who honestly. Some weeks we're more unhappy than others, but Doctor Who is a rich diet there, and that's that. So thank you, Dan. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Brendan. See you, gang.